few months ago, I was in contact via email with a representative from Insta360 about possible collaborations when out of nowhere, the Insta360 X5 dropped. And so I immediately asked if they were interested in doing a collaboration on the X5. And luckily for me, they said yes. And so a few weeks later, this puppy showed up at my doorstep. With that said, full transparency, this video is indeed sponsored by Insta360, and I did get the X5 plus a bunch of accessories free of charge from them for this video. With that out of the way, I am a huge fan of 360 cameras for all of the versatility and creative freedom that they provide. And the X5 is the latest and greatest that Insta360 has to offer. And they are kind of the OG in that particular niche of the action cam market. Right out of the box, this thing just looks and feels great. 360 cameras are so different to all other types of cameras, and this design is very much dictated by its functionality. For all of you who are not acquainted, a 360 camera is in essence an action cam, but it has one lens on either side of the camera that each record a 180-degree field of view simultaneously, and the camera stitches both videos together for one glorious 360-degree video at up to 8K resolution. And because of the way the X5 is shaped, it can completely erase itself from the picture, literally. And the ability to record a 360-degree sphere when paired with the Insta360 Studio app allows you to just select your perspective in post. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, easy. First of all, it gives you a lot of creative freedom to play around with different camera angles that just would not be possible with any other type of action cam. And also, and this is pretty huge for me, it's just a weight off your shoulder because you pretty much cannot mess it up. You cannot mess up the angle or the perspective that you're shooting at because you're just selecting your perspective and your particular angle in post. So you do not have to get the framing right then and there. And it is so great if you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff while you're out and about, because for most people, me included, when I'm using the X5, I'm usually using it to film me doing something else. So doing photography, riding a motorcycle, or whatever it may be. And so I want to have the free headspace to focus on whatever it is that I'm actually doing. And I don't want to worry about what my action cam is doing and if it's actually getting the footage. With the X5, I usually don't have to worry about that at all. A few weeks ago, for example, I went on a photography trip to Lake Como on my Triumph Scrambler. I had a lot of things on my plate that I wanted to do in the short time I had there. Mostly take photos, visit different spots, ride around on my Triumph, survive the heat, enjoy the occasion, and of course, I wanted to document it all in order to make some videos out of it. And luckily, I had the X5 with me to get the job done. The X5, however, for better or worse, is never the main event in any type of video. It's not the camera that is doing the photography, it's the sideshow. It's the unsung hero that does a lot of the heavy lifting while others get all the glory. I don't think that I even recorded a single video clip of the X5 while I was at Lake Como, unlike with all of the other cameras that I was using on that trip, but that's just part of the course. The X5 was, however, always there and always just quietly fulfilling its duty. And also another big benefit of shooting with a 360 camera is that you can choose your aspect ratio in post, because most of you will have noticed that shooting with a 16:9 image and cropping to a vertical aspect ratio in post is not exactly the greatest idea. It just doesn't work as well. But with the X5, you can just select to have a 9:16 aspect ratio in the Studio app and select your framing accordingly in post. And that is kind of what 360 cameras are all about for me. With that said though, the same was also already true for the X4. So what makes the X5 special, and is it actually a worthwhile upgrade if you already have the X4? We'll get back to that point later on, but first allow me to talk you through some of the new features that this X5 offers. Let's start with the design. Now overall, not a lot seems to have changed compared to the X4. The most noticeable change, however, is also an important one. the lenses. Now, the actual lenses of the X4 weren't actually bigger than the ones on the X5, but you really wanted to use the X4 with lens guards to protect the lenses, because if you were to damage your lenses, your camera was pretty much toast. But with those protruding lens guards, the camera was obviously a lot less compact, and also it was a lot more surface area that you could accidentally smudge up with your fatty fingers. With the X5 now, you can just replace the lenses if you ever were to actually damage them and go on with your day. And so that means that you really don't have to use any kind of lens guard, which makes the overall form factor a lot more compact. And so I just kept the X5 in this little protective pouch when I wasn't using it. And for how capable it is and how useful it was on my trips, it barely took up any space in my backpack. Other than that, it's an Insta360 X camera, so it just feels super solid, and neither the X4 nor the X5 have ever given me any kinds of trouble in any condition. So I can state with a good amount of confidence that they are tough as nails. One minor detail that I also appreciate a lot about the X5 is that it is now compatible with the same magnetic quick release mounts as the Ace Pro 2, making on-the-fly mounting and dismounting of cameras easier than ever. Aside from the new lens, there are also a lot of new features here and there that are not quite as in your face, but it's a long list, and with the recent firmware update, that list has gotten even longer, and they added support for some new accessories as well. With that said, the X5 has by now been out for a while, and so I'm sure that most of you will probably already be familiar with most of the headline features that were already available at launch, like the bigger sensor, better and faster chip, improved low light capability, yada yada yada. And so I don't want to talk about those features in this video as much, but instead focus on the newly added features and the added support for new accessories with the recent firmware update. Okay, so first of all, there is this new feature called adaptive tones. Now, this feature isn't necessarily for me, because I personally like to shoot my footage in log, but I know that a lot of people don't, because either they just couldn't be bothered to grade their footage in post, or maybe they don't know how to do it and they couldn't be bothered to learn, which is fair enough. And so for those people who want to have a very well balanced image with loads of dynamic range and so on, Insta360 has now added adaptive tones to the X5, which essentially will give you a more natural and more balanced image with more dynamic range and a correct exposure throughout the image. And just in case you ask, no, it doesn't just look like HDR. At least to my eyes, adaptive tones look a lot more natural than just plain HDR mode. Again, not necessarily a feature that I'm personally interested in, but certainly nice to have for those more casual users out there. More important to me is that there is now support for ND filters for the X5. These newly released ND filters just screw onto the lens. They have this little nudge at the bottom to lock them in place without leaving any smudges on the ND, and the camera will know automatically that you have put an ND filter on. Just confirm the strength of the ND that you've put on there and you are good to go. Now, what they do, for those who don't know, is basically darken your image like sunglasses for your camera. And that in turn allows you to use a slower shutter speed, which will then give you that beautiful motion blur and sense of speed that makes your footage just look more lifelike and more professional. Me personally, I shoot in 25p most of the time, and I like to go with 1/100th of a second shutter speed instead of 1/50th of a second, because in my opinion, 1/50th of a second can almost look too blurry, even though it's technically the right shutter speed to use. At the end of the day though, it's a matter of personal preference. Either way, the addition of ND filters, in my opinion, is a complete game changer for anyone who likes to use these 360 cameras for riding a motorcycle or basically anything of that nature where you want to convey speed and motion. And yeah, using an ND filter just completely changes the game for that. Sadly for me though, since I got those ND filters, the weather has been almost nothing but rain here where I live for the past 3 or 4 weeks or so. And so I've only had a few occasions to actually use those ND filters out and about riding my motorcycle. And I would have loved to have them on my trip to Italy a few weeks ago. But sadly, it was only after I got back home from Italy that I received them in the mail. The X5 now also supports these new Ultra batteries, which come with an orange lining instead of the blue you get on the regular batteries. Now, battery life has honestly never been an issue for me with the X5, quite the opposite actually. I think battery life has always been great for the X5, but hey, I guess more is always better. And so according to Insta360, the new Ultra battery has 17% more capacity than the regular one, and with that, the X5 is able to record for up to 235 minutes at 24p in 5.7K, which is insanity in my book. Just think about how much data that is, but hey, it's also great. Now, me personally, I could not be bothered to do a duration test to confirm if that is actually the case, but honestly, as I said earlier, even with the regular battery life has really never been an issue. But there you go. If you need more battery life, if you want to switch between batteries less often, there's now the Ultra battery. And so Insta360 has got your back. Last but not least, Insta360 now also sells this little Bluetooth microphone called the Mic Air. And it comes in this beautiful little case with a little wind muff, and you can just magnetically clip it to just about anything. Sadly, I don't have a chin wind guard for my motorcycle helmet because I lost it a while ago, but I have put an order in to get a new one, and so as soon as I have that guy, I will use this new Mic Air for some audio commentary on my next few rides. And I'm very happy that getting good audio in your motorcycle helmet is now easier than ever. And so in conclusion, while it might look like the X5 compared to the X4 is just evolution instead of revolution, especially with the new added features via the latest firmware update and the added support for new accessories, I think that it's actually a huge step up from the X4. The X5 takes everything the X4 did and just does it better. On top of that, you can now repair the lens yourself if you need to, without the need for a lens guard. It is smaller in day-to-day use and packs a bunch of new features and supports a bunch of new accessories that can be actual game changers, depending on what type of video you're using this camera for. And so especially for anyone who uses this camera for stuff like motorcycle riding, riding your bicycle, whatever it is, if you want to convey speed and motion, the support for ND filters now just changes the game completely. And so I think that feature alone, but especially obviously paired with the new bigger sensor, faster chip, and so on and so forth, and the fact that this is now a lot more compact without the need for lens guards, I think overall it makes for a pretty big step up compared to the X4 and a worthwhile upgrade if you fall into that category, even if you already have an X4. But that is all I got for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks again to Insta360 for sponsoring today's video. If you would like to pick up an X5 for yourself, feel free to check the links in the description below, which would also support this channel. But I will see you in another video. Until then, take care. Bye.